The first time I saw Willow Creek Estates, it was like stepping into a fever dream of suburban perfection. Rolling up in my work truck on a crisp Saturday morning in September, I couldn't help but marvel at the uniformity. Rows of identical houses stretched out before me, each one a carbon copy of the next. Beige stucco with forest green shutters, perfectly manicured lawns, measuring exactly 4.5 inches in height, not a single blade of grass out of place. My name is Michael Torres, a 38-year-old software engineer who had spent the last decade hustling through Silicon Valley's startup scene. I'd seen my share of chaos, late-night coding sprints, product launches that teetered between brilliance and disaster, venture capital meetings that felt like high-stakes poker games. But nothing, absolutely nothing, could have prepared me for the bureaucratic hellscape that was Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. The house was supposed to be my sanctuary. After years of cramped apartments and temporary living situations, I had finally saved enough to put a down payment on a real home. Not just any home, a 3-bedroom craftsman-style house with a small workshop in the backyard, perfect for my weekend engineering projects and occasional remote work. The realtor had sold me on the neighborhood's exclusive community standards and maintained property values. I should have seen the red flags when she used air quotes and spoke in a whisper. My first hint that something was off came during the closing process. While signing papers, the previous owner, a pale, tired-looking man in his mid-50s, leaned in and whispered, "Good luck with Karen." I thought it was a joke. I was wrong. Karen Whitmore wasn't just the HOA president. She was a force of nature, a 55-year-old tornado of bureaucratic fury wrapped in a perfectly pressed pantsuit. Her husband, Robert, sat on the neighborhood's maintenance board, a convenient arrangement that would later prove to be far more sinister than I could have imagined. The welcome packet arrived before I even finished unpacking. Not a friendly basket of muffins or a nice welcome to the neighborhood card. No, this was a 63-page manifesto of rules, regulations, and potential violations. Each page was color-coded, laminated, and seemed designed to crush any notion of individual expression. Page 37 was a particular masterpiece of suburban authoritarianism. Lawn decorations must not exceed 12 inches in height and must be of a tasteful nature as determined by the HOA board. Tasteful, as defined by Karen, apparently meant bland, beige, and devoid of any personality. The neighborhood itself was a study in controlled perfection. Every house had identical mailboxes, black metal, positioned at exactly the same angle. Trash bins were required to be hidden behind 6-foot privacy fences, painted the same neutral tone as the house. Even the trees seemed to have been selected from a single, approved catalog of suburban landscaping. My workshop was my pride and joy, a small, well-organized space where I could tinker with electronics, work on side projects, and occasionally do some freelance engineering consulting. Little did I know it would become ground zero for my upcoming war with the HOA. 2 weeks after moving in, the first official communication arrived. A crisp white envelope stamped with the HOA logo, a stylized tree that looked more like a military insignia than a neighborhood symbol. The letter was a masterpiece of passive-aggressive bureaucratic language. "Dear Mr. Torres," it read in pristine Times New Roman, "our recent comprehensive property inspection has noted multiple violations of Section 4, Paragraph 2 of the Willow Creek Estates Community Guidelines. Specifically, your waste receptacles were observed to be positioned 3.2 inches outside the designated storage area between 6:04 p.m. and 6:17 p.m. on Tuesday, September 15th. The fine, $75. I laughed at first. Surely this was a joke. Measuring trash bin placement to the inch. Who does that? Karen Whitmore does. And this was just the beginning. Welcome to Willow Creek Estates. Welcome to hell. The HOA citations became a monthly ritual, as predictable as my morning coffee. What started with a $75 fine for trash bin placement quickly escalated into a war of attrition that would test every ounce of my patience and problem-solving skills. My work truck was the primary target. As a field software engineer, my Ford F-150 wasn't just a vehicle. It was my mobile office, loaded with thousands of dollars worth of specialized equipment. But according to Section 6, Paragraph 3 of the Willow Creek Estates Community Guidelines, commercial vehicles were strictly prohibited from residential driveways. Commercial vehicles disrupt the aesthetic harmony of our community, Karen explained during my first formal hearing at the monthly HOA meeting. The meeting room looked like a miniature courthouse, with Karen seated at the head of a long table, her reading glasses perched precisely on the bridge of her nose. I tried reasoning. This is my personal vehicle. I use it for work, but it's registered to me personally. Karen's smile was as sharp as her pressed pantsuit. The guidelines are clear, Mr. Torres. Vehicles with signage, ladder racks, or equipment visible from the street are considered commercial vehicles. They are not permitted. The other board members nodded in synchronized disapproval. An elderly gentleman I'd later learn was named Frank leaned over and whispered something to Karen, who nodded imperceptibly. The first fine came quickly. $150 for persistent commercial vehicle violation. I had two choices: park my trucks several blocks away each night or pay the fine. Neither was acceptable. My attempts to fight back were met with increasing hostility. I discovered that appealing a fine required a $50 non-refundable processing fee, payable even if the appeal was successful. The system was designed to wear down resistance. Then came the lighting violation. My workshop had motion-activated security lights, standard for any homeowner protecting expensive equipment. Karen claimed they were excessively bright and created light pollution that disturbed the neighborhood's tranquility. Another $250 fine landed in my mailbox. I started documenting everything: screenshots of emails, copies of citations, precise measurements of my truck's parking position. Karen seemed to view these documentations as a challenge rather than a deterrent. The most infuriating part was the precision of their violations. One citation noted that my workshop's electrical conduits were positioned at an unsatisfactory 17-degree angle, violating Section 8.4 of Exterior Infrastructure Guidelines. Who measures electrical conduit angles? My neighbor, Sarah, a retired schoolteacher in her early 70s, approached me one afternoon while I was reviewing yet another citation. She looked around nervously, as if afraid of being seen talking to me. "Michael," she whispered, "you're not alone." Sarah pulled out a folder from her canvas bag. It was thick with her own citations, fines for wind chimes that were unnecessarily sonorous, a bird feeder that didn't match the approved neighborhood aesthetic, and even a warning about the color of her welcome mat. "They've been doing this for years," Sarah explained. "Robert Whitmore, Karen's husband. He owns a local maintenance and landscaping company. Every fine requires you to use approved contractors. Guess whose company is always on that list?" The pieces started falling into place. This wasn't just about rules. This was a systematic shakedown. The monthly HOA meeting became my new battlefield. Each session was a carefully choreographed performance of bureaucratic intimidation. Karen would read citations with the dramatic flair of a prosecutor, her voice dripping with condescension. "Mr. Torres continues to demonstrate a blatant disregard for community standards," she would announce, looking directly at me. I realized I was fighting more than just a set of rules. I was fighting a system designed to extract money and crush individual spirit, and I was just getting started. The war had only just begun. By the time November rolled around, my war with the Willow Creek Estates HOA had become a full-blown suburban insurgency. The fines had accumulated like snowflakes in a blizzard, each one more ridiculous than the last. $300 for non-conforming exterior illumination, $250 for architectural disharmony, $500 for persistent commercial vehicle presence. The total now approached $5,000, a sum that seemed less like legitimate fines and more like a carefully orchestrated shakedown. Sarah, my retired schoolteacher neighbor, became my unexpected ally. During one of our clandestine conversations over her meticulously pruned rose bushes, she revealed the deeper history of Karen Whitmore's reign of terror. "It wasn't always like this," Sarah confided, her voice low and tinged with a mixture of anger and resignation. 20 years ago, this neighborhood was a community. Now it's a dictatorship with manicured lawns." She pulled out a thick folder, a chronicle of HOA madness spanning nearly a decade. Citations for the most absurd infractions: a child's chalk drawing on the sidewalk, a basketball hoop positioned 3 degrees off the approved angle, even a warning about a garden gnome that was 0.5 inches taller than the permitted height. The pattern became clear. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were generating revenue through a systematic process of harassment and fines. My software engineering brain went into overdrive. I started mapping out the HOA's financial ecosystem. Robert Whitmore's maintenance company seemed to be at the center of a web of suspicious contracts. Every fine required using approved contractors, conveniently owned by board members or their close associates. The next HOA meeting became my battlefield. I arrived with a meticulously prepared presentation, my laptop loaded with spreadsheets and financial analysis that would make an IRS auditor proud. These fines are inconsistent, I argued, projecting a detailed breakdown of citation frequencies. The rate of violations in our neighborhood is statistically impossible. Karen's response was immediate and venomous. "Mr. Torres, are you suggesting that the board is acting inappropriately?" The room fell silent. Frank, the elderly board member who always sat closest to Karen, shifted uncomfortably. But Karen wasn't done. A new citation arrived the very next day, this time targeting my workshop. Apparently, the electrical conduits were now creating an electromagnetic disturbance that violated some obscure section of the bylaws. The fine, $750. My neighbor Tom, a recently retired electrical engineer, confirmed what I already suspected. The citation was complete nonsense. My electrical setup was perfectly standard, meeting all local and national building codes. Sarah's support proved crucial. She began collecting statements from other homeowners who had been similarly targeted. An elderly couple had been fined for having their garbage cans 6 inches too far from the curb. Another neighbor received a warning for a non-approved shade of beige on their exterior wall. The HOA's tactics were becoming more aggressive. When I challenged the latest fine, Karen sent a certified letter threatening legal action. The message was clear: comply or face potentially ruinous legal expenses. But here's the thing about software engineers: we're problem solvers. We don't just accept broken systems. We find ways to debug them. I began building a digital case file. Every citation, every financial record, every suspicious contract. I cross-referenced, analyzed, and documented with the precision of a forensic accountant. California had strict laws governing HOAs. There were regulations about conflict of interest, financial transparency, and reasonable enforcement of community guidelines. Karen and her board were operating in a gray area that was about to become very black and white. My smartphone became my primary weapon. I recorded meetings. I cataloged every interaction. I was building a case that would make Karen's carefully constructed house of cards come tumbling down. The war was just beginning, and I was done playing defense. The foreclosure notice arrived 2 days before Christmas. $12,467.83 in accumulated fines and penalties. A lion's document that transformed my dream home into a potential legal nightmare. I stared at the certified letter, my hands trembling with a mixture of rage and disbelief. Karen Whitmore had crossed a line. The accumulation of fines had been methodical, almost surgical in its precision, each citation strategically placed to maximize financial pressure. My work truck, the workshop's electrical system, alleged landscaping violations, mysterious aesthetic disruption charges that seemed pulled from thin air. I remembered the warning from the previous homeowner, that cryptic whisper during closing. Good luck with Karen. Now I understood. My first call was to Sarah, my retired school teacher neighbor. She arrived within 30 minutes, a manila folder tucked under her arm, and a look of determination that belied her 72 years. "I've been collecting documentation for years," she said, spreading out years of HOA citations across my kitchen table. "I'm not the only victim. There are at least 12 homeowners who've been systematically targeted." The pattern was clear now. The HOA wasn't just enforcing rules. They were running a sophisticated extortion scheme. Robert Whitmore's maintenance company received preferential treatment on every repair. Fines were strategically issued to homeowners who didn't use their approved contractors. My software engineering background kicked into high gear. I began a forensic analysis of every single citation, every fine, every interaction with the HOA. Metadata became my weapon. IP addresses of emails, timestamps of citations, financial records that showed a disturbing pattern of monetization. The breaking point came during an emergency HOA meeting I demanded. I arrived with a meticulously prepared presentation that would make a federal investigator proud. These fines are not about community standards, I announced, projecting a series of spreadsheets and financial analysis. They're about generating revenue through systematic harassment. Karen's response was immediate and telling. Mr. Torres, you are disrupting the harmony of our community. These proceedings will be recorded as another violation. Frank, the elderly board member who always sat closest to Karen, shifted uncomfortably. Something in my presentation had struck a nerve. The financial analysis was damning. Over the past 5 years, the HOA had collected nearly $1.2 million in fines. Coincidentally, Robert Whitmore's maintenance company had received contracts totaling almost the exact same amount. But the foreclosure threat was a step too far. In California, HOAs have strict regulations about liens and foreclosure proceedings. Every step must be meticulously documented. Every fine must be justifiable. Mine were not. I contacted a lawyer specializing in HOA disputes. Jennifer Rodriguez was a shark in a perfectly tailored suit, with a reputation for dismantling predatory HOA practices. This is textbook harassment, she said after reviewing my documentation. They're using fines as a revenue generation mechanism, and the conflict of interest with Robert Whitmore's maintenance company, that's a legal minefield. The next blow came quickly. A tow truck arrived one morning, preparing to remove my work truck. The driver, looking uncomfortable, showed me a citation claiming the vehicle was abandoned despite being legally parked in my own driveway. I stood my ground, recorded everything. The driver left, but the message was clear: the HOA was willing to escalate to physical action. Sarah helped me organize a small group of targeted homeowners. We began comparing notes, collecting documentation, building a case that would expose the HOA's systematic abuse. Karen had made a critical mistake. By pushing too hard, by threatening foreclosure, she had transformed a minor dispute into a full-scale investigation. I was no longer just fighting for my home. I was fighting for the entire neighborhood. The war was about to go nuclear. Knowledge is power, and in my case, data was my most potent weapon. With Jennifer Rodriguez's legal guidance and my software engineering precision, I began constructing an ironclad case against the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Every citation, every fine, every suspicious transaction became a piece of a complex digital puzzle. I set up a secure website, accessible only to the homeowners who had been systematically targeted. Sarah helped compile a database of experiences, creating a comprehensive record of the HOA's predatory practices. We weren't just collecting complaints. We were building a legal strategy. My first breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Tom, the retired electrical engineer from down the street, discovered something fascinating in the HOA's public financial records. Robert Whitmore's maintenance company had been charging significantly higher rates to our neighborhood compared to similar communities, sometimes by as much as 40%. Look at these invoices, Tom said during one of our strategy meetings, spreading out a series of documents on my kitchen table. It's not just overcharging. It's a sophisticated scheme of financial exploitation. Jennifer confirmed our suspicions. The conflict of interest was glaring. Robert Whitmore sat on the HOA board while simultaneously profiting from maintenance contracts. In California, this was a clear violation of multiple state regulations governing homeowners associations. We began gathering formal statements from affected homeowners. The stories were eerily similar: precise, almost mathematically calculated harassment. Fines for the most microscopic infractions, threats of legal action, mandatory use of specific contractors. Sarah's decades of teaching had given her an incredible network. She reached out to former students now working in local government, journalism, and legal fields. Each contact provided another piece of the puzzle. A breakthrough came when we discovered a pattern of financial irregularities. The Eloise budget reports didn't add up. Money was being funneled through shell companies, with Robert Whitmore's maintenance firm at the center of a complex financial web. I developed a custom data analysis tool, a piece of software that could cross-reference financial records, citation histories, and contractor payments. The results were damning. The LOA wasn't just bending rules. They were systematically exploiting an entire community. Jennifer was impressed. "This is better documentation than most professional investigations I've seen," she told me during one of our strategy sessions. "We're not just fighting a local HOA. We're exposing a sophisticated financial fraud." The next step was strategic exposure. We couldn't just file a lawsuit. We needed to create enough public pressure to force a comprehensive investigation. I reached out to a local investigative journalist, Maria Rodriguez, who had a reputation for exposing municipal and corporate corruption. When I shared our documentation, her eyes widened. "This is bigger than just one neighborhood," Maria said, reviewing our meticulously compiled evidence. "This could be a systemic issue affecting multiple communities." We planned carefully. A coordinated release of information, statements from multiple affected homeowners, documented evidence of financial irregularities. The goal wasn't just to win our individual fights, it was to dismantle a predatory system. Karen must have sensed something was coming. The citations became more frequent, more aggressive. It was like watching a cornered animal lash out, desperate and increasingly irrational. One afternoon, I received a personal visit from Karen herself. She stood on my doorstep, clipboard in hand, her perfectly pressed suit a stark contrast to the desperation in her eyes. "You're making a mistake," she said, her voice a mixture of threat and plea. I simply smiled. "No, Karen, you made the mistakes. We're just documenting them." The fight was no longer about a single homeowner versus an HOA. It was about exposing a system of institutional corruption. And we were just getting started. The nuclear option was about to be deployed. The first crack in Karen Whitmore's carefully constructed empire appeared during the monthly HOA meeting in February. What was supposed to be a routine gathering transformed into a battlefield of truth. Maria Rodriguez, the investigative journalist, sat in the back of the community center, her recorder discreetly capturing every moment. I had strategically positioned our key witnesses, Sarah, Tom, and 3 other long-suffering homeowners, throughout the room. The moment Karen called the meeting to order, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Frank, the elderly board member who had always been Karen's loyal supporter, looked unusually nervous. His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his glasses, and for the first time, he wasn't sitting directly next to Karen. I stood up during the open forum, my laptop connected to the room's projector. "I'd like to discuss some financial irregularities in our HOA's operations." I began, my voice calm and methodical. The first slide showed a comparative analysis of maintenance contract pricing. Side-by-side comparisons revealed that Willow Creek Estates was paying nearly 40% more for identical services compared to similar communities. Robert Whitmore's maintenance company logo was prominently displayed, creating an immediate visual link. "These aren't just minor discrepancies," I continued. "These are systematic overcharges that directly benefit board members." Karen's face transformed. The carefully maintained composure cracked, revealing a mixture of panic and rage. "These are baseless accusations," she interrupted, her voice rising. But the evidence was overwhelming. Spreadsheets showed intricate financial trails. Invoices demonstrated consistent overbilling. Bank records revealed suspicious transfers between board members' personal accounts and the HOA's financial reserves. Tom, the retired electrical engineer, stood up next. "I've independently verified these numbers," he announced. "The financial mismanagement is not just unethical, it's potentially criminal." Maria Rodriguez was typing furiously, her journalist's instincts sensing a major story. The local news cameras that had been invited began capturing every moment of the unfolding drama. Frank, who had always been Karen's closest ally, suddenly spoke up. "I want to see those documents," he said, his voice surprisingly firm. It was the first time I'd heard him speak against Karen in years. The board members began to turn on each other. Whispers became arguments. Accusations flew. The carefully maintained facade of community unity was crumbling in real time. Jennifer Rodriguez, my lawyer, had strategically positioned herself near the back of the room. She knew exactly how to apply legal pressure. "We have formal documentation ready to file with the State Housing Authority," she announced, her voice cutting through the chaos. The State Housing Authority investigation was our nuclear option. Once initiated, it would forensically examine every aspect of the HOA's operations. Financial records, contract awards, fine collections, nothing would be sacred. Karen's desperate attempts to regain control only made things worse. She tried to call for a vote to silence the discussion, but her motion died before it could be seconded. Board members who had once followed her blindly were now keeping their distance. Robert Whitmore, who had remained silent throughout the meeting, suddenly looked small. The powerful contractor who had ruled the neighborhood through fear was now exposed, his network of corruption laid bare for everyone to see. "These allegations are completely unfounded," Karen tried one last time, but her voice lacked its previous authority. Maria Rodriguez approached me after the meeting, her eyes bright with the excitement of a journalist who knew she was about to break a major story. "This goes beyond one neighborhood," she said. "This could trigger investigations in other communities." As we left the community center, Sarah squeezed my hand. "You did it," she whispered. "You're giving us our neighborhood back." But I knew this was just the beginning. The real battle was yet to come. The HOA's days were numbered, and we were just getting started. The State Housing Authority hearing was nothing short of a judicial demolition. What had begun as a neighborhood dispute had transformed into a full-scale investigation that would reverberate through municipal corridors. I sat in the hearing room, surrounded by Sarah, Tom, and the other homeowners who had been systematically targeted, watching as years of corruption unraveled like a cheap sweater. Administrative law judge Elena Rodriguez was a force of nature. Her reputation for thoroughness was legendary, and she approached the Willow Creek Estates HOA investigation with the precision of a surgeon and the intensity of a prosecutor. Karen and Robert Whitmore sat at the defendant's table, their once immaculate appearance now showing visible signs of strain. Karen's perfectly pressed suit was wrinkled, her hair no longer the meticulously styled helmet it once was. Robert looked like a deflated balloon, the power he'd wielded for years now completely stripped away. Our digital evidence presentation was a masterpiece of forensic documentation. Using custom software I developed, we mapped out every single financial transaction, every suspicious fine, every inflated maintenance contract. The visualization was damning. A complex web of financial manipulation that spread across years of HOA operations. "Mr. Torres," Judge Rodriguez addressed me directly, "walk me through how you compiled this evidence." I explained the process methodically, how we used data analysis techniques to cross-reference financial records, how we tracked patterns of fines, contractor selections, and fund transfers. Each explanation was backed by meticulously prepared spreadsheets and digital forensic evidence. Maria Rodriguez, the investigative journalist, sat in the press section. Her articles had already begun creating a domino effect. Other HOAs in the region were now under scrutiny, our case becoming a catalyst for broader investigations. The most devastating moment came when Frank, the elderly board member who had once been Karen's most loyal supporter, testified. "I knew things weren't right," Frank said, his voice trembling. "But I was afraid. We were all afraid of Karen. She controlled everything, every decision, every contract, every fine." His testimony broke something fundamental in the HOA's defense. Here was an insider, someone who had been part of the system, now turning against it. Jennifer Rodriguez, my lawyer, presented the legal case with surgical precision. She demonstrated how the HOA had violated multiple state regulations, conflict of interest in contract awards, improper financial reporting, systematic harassment of homeowners, potential criminal misuse of HOA funds. The financial forensics were particularly brutal. We had traced over $1.4 million in suspicious transactions, contracts inflated by 40%, fines generated as a revenue stream, shell companies used to obscure financial trails. Karen's attempt to defend herself was pathetic. We were just trying to maintain community standards, she argued weakly. Judge Rodriguez's response was swift and devastating. Mrs. Whitmore, what you've done goes far beyond maintaining community standards. This is systematic financial abuse. The hearing lasted 3 days. Each moment was a methodical dismantling of the Whitmore's power structure. Witnesses testified. Documents were presented. The full extent of the HOA's corruption was laid bare for everyone to see. When the final ruling came down, it was comprehensive. Complete dissolution of the current HOA board. Mandatory financial restitution to targeted homeowners. Permanent ban on Karen and Robert Whitmore from serving on any HOA board. Criminal referral to the district attorney's office for potential prosecution. Sarah squeezed my hand as the verdict was read. Tom whispered, "We did it." But I knew the victory was about more than just our neighborhood. We had exposed a systemic problem, created a blueprint for fighting HOA corruption, and given hope to countless other homeowners trapped in similar situations. As we walked out of the hearing room, the weight of our victory was palpable. The suburban dictatorship had fallen, and we were just getting started. 6 months after the hearing, Willow Creek Estates was unrecognizable. The old HOA board was gone, replaced by a democratically elected group of homeowners committed to transparency and fairness. Sarah, to everyone's delight, became the new HOA president, a testament to the power of persistent, principled resistance. Our legal victory had far-reaching consequences. The state legislature began drafting new regulations for homeowners associations, inspired directly by our case. Maria Rodriguez's investigative series had turned our local battle into a statewide movement, exposing HOA corruption in communities across California. The financial aftermath was significant. Karen and Robert Whitmore faced multiple legal challenges. Their maintenance company was dissolved. Robert's professional reputation was in tatters, and Karen found herself unemployed and facing potential criminal charges. I received a call from the state attorney general's office. They wanted to use our case as a model for HOA reform. My meticulously collected digital evidence became a blueprint for identifying systemic HOA corruption. "You've done more than just fight a local battle," the lead investigator told me. "You've exposed a systematic problem that affects thousands of homeowners." The monetary compensation was substantial, not just the reimbursement of fines, but additional damages for the years of harassment. My work truck, once the primary target of HOA citations, now sat proudly in my driveway, a symbol of our victory. But the most profound changes were cultural. Homeowners across the neighborhood began to speak up. Tom started a monthly meeting where residents could discuss community issues openly. The fear that had previously silenced everyone was gone, replaced by a sense of collective empowerment. Our digital platform, initially created to gather evidence, transformed into a resource for homeowners fighting unreasonable HOA practices. Requests for help came from across the state, people seeing our story as a beacon of hope. Jennifer Rodriguez's law firm established a special division focusing on HOA-related cases, inspired by our success. "Your documentation was better than most professional investigations," she told me during a follow-up meeting. "You've changed how we approach these cases." The irony wasn't lost on me. Karen had tried to break me with bureaucratic harassment. Instead, she had created a movement. At the first new HOA meeting under Sarah's leadership, the transformation was obvious. Gone were the rigid rules about lawn heights and mailbox colors. In their place was a genuine conversation about community needs. "We're here to support each other," Sarah announced, "not to punish each other." My workshop, once a target of endless citations, became a community resource. I started offering free tech workshops for neighborhood kids, teaching them about coding, electronics, and how to stand up to systemic unfairness. Maria Rodriguez's final article about our case was titled "How One Neighborhood Took Back Its Power." It became required reading in several local government and legal ethics courses. The state housing authority implemented new oversight mechanisms. HOA boards now faced strict reporting requirements, conflict of interest disclosures, and regular external audits. During a follow-up interview, I was asked if I felt vindicated. My response was simple. This was never about winning. This was about creating a fair system. Frank, the elderly board member who had finally found the courage to speak out, became an unexpected ally. He started a support group for HOA board members who wanted to do the right thing, sharing our story as a cautionary tale and a path to redemption. As for Karen and Robert Whitmore, they became a cautionary tale, a reminder that power built on harassment and financial manipulation is ultimately fragile. Willow Creek Estates was no longer a pristine prison. It had become a community. And sometimes that's the most powerful revenge of all.